Welcome everybody that's joined. If we can just, if you don't mind waiting a couple of minutes, that'd be awesome. Just if there are any latecomers, thanks very much. In the meantime, I just remind you there is a option for Q&A at the end, so it'd be great if you could submit some questions. We'd be very pleased to answer them. Okay, we'll probably get started now. If anyone has any problems hearing or seeing the screen, if you could just shout up in the chat, that would be awesome. Also, just to let you know, there's a handout that's been attached. You should be able to access that. And that is our Evolving Threat Guide for 2020. Just a quick by way of introduction, my name is Lizzie Eccles. I'm the Service Delivery Manager at Netacea. I've been here for about 3 years or so. Worked with customers across many different verticals, solving bot-related challenges, and I'm still involved in the day-to-day business of what we do as well, taking an active part in monitoring and preventing evolving attacks on customer sites. Andy, do you want to say a quick hello?
Hi, yeah, I'm Andy. I'm CTO and the co-founder of Netacea. I've been working in the bot space now for about 5 or 6 years. My background before that was working in web development, building high performance, high usage, high complexity websites. So I came to this bot space by really looking at high volume websites and trying to detect why sometimes the level of usage that we were seeing didn't reflect the level expected based on conversion, etc. And we discovered that there was a lot of automated traffic in there. So that's my background, and that's how I got into this space.
Thanks, Andy. So in part 2 of our 3-part series, we'll be discussing the findings from our threat report while feeding in demographic insights. However, for any of you who might not have caught the last webinar on Thursday last week, let's have a quick recap. Earlier this year, we spoke to around 200 enterprise businesses across travel, entertainment, e-commerce, and finance. Get a broad picture of how bots are understood and protected against within those businesses. Before we explore what threats each industry is facing, Andy will give us a quick overview of what bots are and how they're affecting businesses around the world. Thanks,
Lizzie. So just a quick introduction to what we mean when we talk about bots. Just so anyone who wasn't on previous webinars or anyone who's new to this space, what do we mean by bots? At the highest level, what we describe as a bot would be any request that's made to a website that is triggered by an automated process rather than something that's coming from a direct human action. What sort of things do we mean by that? There's quite a large amount, and we find this takes up quite a chunk of the traffic that hits most web systems. There's a lot of good bots out there, so bots is not all bad. Some of them, search engines, for example, the internet wouldn't really function in the way that we know it without those kind of systems. Other things like uptime checkers, SEO tools, security scanners, again, these are all good things. They keep websites operating in a correct and functional manner. On the other side, we've got a lot of things that are clearly bad bots. We've got people doing credential stuff, and we've got account takeover. We've got people creating fake accounts trying to exploit things like bonuses associated with new accounts, things like that. We've got carding attacks, people flooding websites with lots of different cards to see which ones are valid. And then we've got things like scraping, content theft, and a lot of other ones. And I think we've got some here which we put in the category of good, but they can be good or bad. And I think this is particularly relevant when we look later on at some of the challenges that we're talking about. So if things like price comparison sites and aggregator sites and affiliates which are actually doing scraping activity, they may be good or they may be bad, and that depends on the view of the company that data is actually being taken from. But before we go any further, I just want to highlight another key difference, which is the difference between what we think of as bot traffic and what we may think of as hacking, more traditional kind of hacking. The difference is that what hackers are trying to do is they're automating processes, but they're trying to carry out illegitimate activity. And when they do that, they'll exploit technical weaknesses in the website. So they're trying to basically do things that shouldn't be allowed to try and get access to areas of the site that they shouldn't be. As an example, a SQL injection attack is about sending commands to a database that's not properly secured, that allows you to get access to the underlying data in a way that the developer never intended you to. What bots are doing is different, because what they're doing is they're sending legitimate requests. They're sending the same kind of requests as the actual legitimate users will do. They're just doing it in different combinations or different sets of activities, which means that they can exploit some of the business logic weaknesses. As a simple example, logging in is perfectly legitimate. If you're logging in thousands of times as part of a credential stuffing attack, that is not legitimate. That's a bot attack. And what we've seen in the bot world as well over the last few years is just a massive growth in the amount of bot activity that we're seeing. And a lot of that is triggered by the growth of what we call the bot ecosystem. So this is a set of tools, services, configs, etc., that just enable bot activity to be undertaken on a much larger scale and by people with much lower kind of entry levels of technical ability. So there's tools out there that you can download which just simplify the process of launching bot attacks. There's services out there that are commercial services that will ease the distribution of bot attacks and make them much easier to hide in amongst normal traffic. And all that is on top of the actual data breaches that are going on. What this ecosystem is doing is people are using this as a business. It's a money-making business, but it's just enabling these bot attacks to be made much more easily. And I'll hand back now to Lizzie to give us some details about what we found in the survey.
Awesome, Andy, thank you so much. So as part of our research, we wanted to understand where responsibility for the bot challenge lives. So within enterprise organisations, is there a single point where sort of the buck stops? Our own experience has revealed that this very much depends on the business and for which department bots have become the biggest problem. Skip on the slide. As part of our, there are very few businesses with a single bot management owner. And we see this more or less across the board. So for those where it is shared amongst several departments, responsibility can lie with maybe the head of IT or the head of security, sometimes even into product directors, or even sometimes within marketing, depending on what the sort of problem is that's been observed and where the pain point is. While the average business splits ownership across 3 or more departments, in some extreme cases it could be up to 7. The trouble is, when ownership is shared between so many, there's no real responsibility and the buck doesn't stop anywhere really, and taking action can be slow and cumbersome. We're going to look into this further in our next webinar, but Andy, could you give us a quick insight into the challenge of shared responsibility in your experience?
Yeah, thanks, Lizzie. I think, you've highlighted one, which is lack of ownership, but I think it's interesting to look at why this particularly affects the bot market. I think part of this is looking at the background of how bot attacks have evolved and our awareness of them has evolved. In the past, they were fairly well hidden or not noticed, and they came to the notice of very specific use cases. So the marketing team may be aware that ad fraud was going on, or their analytics weren't matching up to what they were expecting. The web team may detect the presence of scrapers, competitors stealing their prices, that kind of thing. The ops team may become aware of the impact of bot activity if it was taking the systems beyond capacity, that kind of thing. And then obviously the security team would become aware of some of the impact of credential stuffing attacks, for example, and those kind of more fraudulent activities. And because those kind of use cases were all detected independently, you ended up with this distribution of problem solving. And what that does lead to is you don't get this a good joined up solution to a problem. You get people solving just their bit of the problem, not necessarily in the best way, or certainly the most strategic way as a company. So I think getting that single owner does allow you to make sure that you've got something in place that is not only solving all the problems, but it's solving all the problems in an efficient way. You've not got tools that conflict with each other or creating problems elsewhere.
Yeah, I suppose you might get multiplication of effort as well. So if we take maybe one of the industries that we're talking about in today's webinar, gaming and gambling, which falls under entertainment, you might have issues. You might have one department spotting odds being scraped, and you might have another department noticing that bonus abuse is going on. Actually, it could be the same actors, or it could be different actors working independently, but you could have one solution that would resolve both without both teams having to get sort of deep into the weeds of the problem.
Yeah, I think that is a great point, because what we do see is that increasingly bot attacks are being undertaken by a range of different people, and people will be just so compromising just one part of the system. One group will be looking for compromised sets of credentials, another group will be determining what to do with those, another group will be executing bonus abuse. So if you can get that joined up view of understanding all the different types of attack, you can get a solution that will hang together much better.
I suppose it's a bit like you have the user journey, obviously, that we're all familiar with websites, and it's almost like the criminality journey is different levels of wrongness. Anyway, moving on. Next slide. Here we go. All that said, around 1 in 10 businesses do actually have a single owner, and when that's the case, just over half stated that the owner is CISO or head of IT security, and 26% said that the owner is head of website development or something similar. Interestingly, neither travel nor the financial sector could identify a specific owner of bot management. Andy, do you think that's likely to change in the coming months as bots become an increasingly prevalent threat for those industries?
Yes, I think we've definitely seen this trend evolving over the years, as people have started to understand the scale of the problem that this activity poses to companies. We have seen that start to consolidate, and more it does seem to be consolidating with the CISO, and we think this is exactly the right place for it. I mean, this is a growing problem, and these levels of bots do cause a serious problem to all websites. We think this is a really good movement. I think absolutely this should be something that's looked at as part of any standard website security strategy that people are building. So I think the more we see moving to CISO, I think it reflects the seriousness that people should be taking the problem with, and I expect and also hope that as we move forward, that this consolidation will continue in this direction.
Cool. Okay, that segues nicely actually into the next bit of the webinar. So, how are bots affecting your industry, not our industry, your industry? These are the sectors that our experience suggests are most at risk from bots: finance, travel, e-commerce, and entertainment. And as I mentioned earlier, that includes things like gaming and gambling. This slide shows what the common factors are across verticals. So when we look at the total answers across all industries, the greatest risk to businesses were reported either as loss of customers or as reputational damage. Customer loss was the top concern for entertainment and financial services, and that sort of makes sense really, as they're both really competitive industries and easy for people to move between them. And financial services providers are obviously entrusted with their customers' livelihoods, so if they're compromised, it could have dire consequences for both them and the customer. And with online streaming, the problem is that the sheer number of rivals offering similar services. So if customers feel they can no longer trust one entertainment service with their details, there are plenty more fish in the sea as far as that goes. Most travel providers were concerned about the impact of a bot attack on their reputation, and this reflects on the rise in attacks that we've been seeing targeting this sector in the last year alone, many of which have been well publicised, and people are getting more and more used to reading about this sort of thing and understanding the consequences. Andy, why do you think we've seen a rise in bot attacks targeting the travel industry? Are there any particular attacks that the travel industry should be aware of? Do you think COVID-19 is going to have any sort of effects or a rise in incidents that we haven't even seen before?
Yeah, Lizzie, I think that's a great question around the travel industry. And travel has historically been actually one of the industries that's been particularly targeted by bot activity. And I think if we think back to the kind of things we were mentioning at the start around things that may be good or bad bots, travel has been something that's been very much targeted by price comparison sites, aggregator sites, affiliate sites, and that has not always been something that's been something that the companies have been happy about. Particularly, we see airlines taking quite a lot of action, legal and practical action, in order to stop scraping activity. We hear about speaking to someone from a hotel booking company recently, talking about how they had a lot of trouble with fake affiliates who would actually take their main site down due to the amount of scraping that we're doing. And I think what's been interesting talking to some travel sites during the COVID situation is that as their natural usage of the website has reduced because of the impact of COVID and the reduction in the amount of travel that's been going on, they've seen that the proportional impact of bot activity is actually much higher, and it's become much more obvious. So any costs that are accrued as a result of bot activity, whether that is just usage costs or whether it's related to API usage that they pay for by request, has suddenly become a much bigger chunk of their outgoings, and it's become much more noticeable during COVID. But what I wanted to just show today is a couple of examples of some of the newer types of activity that's also going on around travel. And this is looking at the growth in people who are using things like loyalty points and air miles as a form of currency on the internet. And these people do seem to particularly target the travel industry. And I've got a few examples here. This is one of the markets where you can go to buy the tooling that we were talking about earlier, which just allows you to create easy attacks onto particular websites. And then the way those tools work is that people can write configs which target particular websites, and then they're sold on the marketplace. And this is how people make their money. This is their business in selling these configs to people. And just highlight a couple on here which do target the travel industry, and that will just enable people to launch an attack like that and come up with valid sets of usernames and credentials which you could then use the loyalty points for, or steal loyalty points for. And what they do with those is that there's then a whole market for these loyalty points that actually look to provide marketplaces for selling flights and selling on loyalty points. And pulled this example out. This is the branding on one of them. Again, just to illustrate that these are more legitimate looking business. People are running these as businesses. They're making a lot of money out of it. They're not all suspicious looking things. And this is again just some examples of sites where for an amount of Bitcoin you can buy flights or hotels that have actually been paid for with stolen loyalty points. And another example here, again, just showing that this person here is selling guaranteed credentials that you can log in with a certain amount of points available, and they actually sell those for a percentage of the value. And this again is illustrating how the bot market will bring a combination of people solving little bits of the problem together. So this is someone who's cracked this account and they're now making it available. Someone else is buying that, and then they take the next area of risk available versus the benefit of the discount. And then just another example here of Transport for London saying that, you know, people are trying this same kind of thing around Oyster cards to actually take advantage of credit that's on Oyster cards. Okay, so just a few examples from some of the attacks on travel there. Hand back now to Lizzie.
Yep, thank you, Andy. It's kind of amazing, isn't it? I mean, these sorts of attacks wouldn't have even been considered even vaguely possible. It sounds like science fiction just a few years ago, and now they're kind of becoming the norm, really. They have to, as people are becoming a bit more aware of how they need to protect things, people are, you know, people are becoming sneakier about how to exploit in other avenues. So it is quite mad. Anyway, moving on. E-commerce. So e-commerce firms are most concerned about the quality of their analytics. So as bot attackers say, it's increasingly difficult to tell what's been browsed by a real person, what has been an automated bot. For e-commerce sites, this dilutes the quality of analytics used to inform business decisions. How can they tell if a product's actually been a popular browsing choice, or if a marketing campaign has been effective, if the majority of the traffic isn't even real? This year, more than ever, retailers will be focusing on what works and what doesn't as they try to make the most of the peak shopping period that we're heading into now. Just like the travel industry, COVID-19 has had a massive effect on the retail sector and has created immense pressure for the industry to perform well with peak period coming up. In last week's webinar, we found out that 76% of businesses were aware of a bot attack occurring in the last 2 years. But let's break that down a tiny bit further. Overall, around a quarter of businesses reported that they had not been attacked by a bot in the last 2 years. If we break this down by industry, almost every financial services company and travel provider reported that bots had attacked them at some point or other. But more than half of the entertainment businesses we spoke to said that they hadn't. In fact, we can see the results of bot attacks on various entertainment services without even setting a foot on the dark web, which is where Andy's been poking about with his research. Cheap accounts for music and video streaming services are easily available in marketplaces that specialise in stolen accounts, and these are only possible thanks to bots that can run through combo lists and try thousands of different possible login. And they can try thousands of different login credentials and combinations of usernames and passwords in a super duper short space of time. So as we round up our second webinar, we're starting to see a picture emerging. Why is it that enterprises have a high awareness of the bot challenge and yet have a limited understanding? In our final webinar, we'll explore the effects of a lack of ownership when businesses seek to understand and manage malicious bots, while analysing where organisations currently lack visibility of their overall traffic. Andy, over to you for some final thoughts.
Okay, so I mean, we've talked a lot about the dangers of bot attacks, so I didn't really want to just end this without giving you some reassurance that there is actually a way to deal with this and to make the problem go away. There are a lot of bot protection systems out there. Many people have them, at least a partial one, often as part of another solution. But I think I just want to cover up the fact they're not all the same. There's a few different ways of actually handling detecting bots. By and large, we find that the majority of bot protection out there actually takes one of these approaches. And what it is largely they look at injecting some JavaScript onto a website or an extension onto a mobile app to do some client-side monitoring. The basic idea behind that is that works on the assumption that a bot will not use the client in the same way as a human would. So they will do things like just check that the device can do certain things. So is it a real browser? Is it an up-to-date consumer browser? They'll look at what the device functionality is. They'll build a kind of device fingerprint that determines what that device can do. And then they'll do checks like looking at how the user moves the mouse, how they type the keyboards, and determining whether that's human. And then they'll do some kind of basic, like known bad IP addresses, known bad countries, that kind of thing. What they're essentially doing is they're setting traps that they believe the bots will find them difficult to pass. What we do at Netacea is we actually take a completely different approach to that. you know, we're looking at just the sophistication of bots these days is such that they can actually automate a lot of the client side things now. So they will be executing from real browsers. They will be able to fake the device fingerprint, and they will be able to mimic human movements. So actually finding that type of defense is not particularly effective, and it's actually adding risk because you're putting complex JavaScript on people's websites. So the approach that we take is that we actually look at all the traffic that's hitting the server. So we look at all the activity that's going on the server. So what is the user actually doing on the server? What functionality are they executing? We look at that behavior and we look for known bad patterns of behavior. So what does that mean? We look at that at 2 levels. For each individual user, we'll build a pattern of every interaction that they have and everything we know about them. So where are they coming from? You know, what page are they hitting? What journey are they following? Does that match something that we know is a bad attack pattern? And then can we categorize it as a particular type of bot? But as well as the individual users, actually, we look at all the users. You know, bots don't usually act on their own. They're usually part of an overall bot attack. So we look at the activities of all the users as well. Again, we look at how we can categorize those users, which ones are showing similar behaviors, and which of those behaviors are good or bad, and then can we categorize them as known bots. So that allows us to quickly detect large-scale attacks and group users together, and we can stay ahead of that, the distribution of that attack, to make sure we're getting the majority of that attack. What we're also enables us to do is stay ahead of the bots, because bots are obviously launching new types of attack all the time. So as well as looking for patterns we've seen before, we're also constantly looking for unusual activity. Well, because we're seeing everything, we get a pretty good pattern of what's normal. When something that's not normal arises, we look at that to determine whether or not that is good or whether it's bad. So we get that overall view of what's going on. And the result of that is that we can actually get really good levels of detection. So just pulled out a few examples here. That the one on the bottom left against one of the more legacy bot management tools, we're typically seeing close to 40% higher rates of detection. And against just basic security applications, we're getting over 75% more than that. So that's just a few examples of just some of the levels of detection that we can get, just to hopefully reassure people that after telling all the scary stories about what bots can do and the threat that they pose, that there is a solution to this. So
all the terrible things that can happen and all the easy ways that they can achieve these things. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, just to round up, just a couple of things to say, hopefully pull together the things that we've talked about today. The first is that look at bots. Bots are obviously essential to the internet, but they're obviously really threatening. Malicious bots can cause major damage. That can be to brand, it can be to your actual to customers themselves. They can be impacted as well as your own bottom line. So it's really important that you do look at this, you understand what's going on, and make sure that you've got an appropriate strategy to deal with that. And that includes having clear ownership of that. Okay, so at this point, we'll start picking up some questions. I think there's a couple in there already. If anyone's got any more questions, please just type it into the question box on the GoToWebinar control panel, and then Lizzie and I will try and work through a few of these. Okay, so the first one that we have got there is asking about the relationship between bot management and some of the existing security tools. So the question is, I already have a WAF which has a bot management module in there. Will this solve the problem? I can answer that one basically by saying it's fairly common that there is bot management modules in a lot of security devices, whether it's load balancers, whether it's WAFs, CDNs, and the majority of those take the older approach that we were talking about earlier. So they're fairly basic kind of systems. They will stop some bots. Obviously, they will take away some of the lowest hanging fruit, some of the less sophisticated bots. But we are finding that the sophistication of bots is moving on. It's triggered by the development of these basic bot management tools. Bots have moved on to be able to bypass them. So I think it's a matter of, when you've got one of those solutions in place, monitoring and just looking, is it actually solving the problem that you're going to, or are you still seeing bot activity? Our expectation is that the level of defence that you're seeing will probably go down over time as bots learn to bypass the defences that you've got in place.
Absolutely. I mean, we're seeing bots in certain customer sites. We're seeing them retooling within a matter of hours. So it's got to be super dynamic. And if the prize is big enough, and sometimes it can be, especially with things like bonus abuse or credential stuffing and so on, if the prize is big enough, then it's absolutely in their interest to retool. So you need something that's got some kind of level of behavioural analysis in there, so that it can pick up on that retooling and when things evolve and change.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move on to the next question that we've got. This is coming from Marcel, and this asks, what's involved in getting this kind of solution up and running? Is it a complex integration? Again, that's a good question, and I think again, talking about our approach, which we feel is the best approach, can appreciate why that question's being asked, because there's a large amount of data that we would need to collect to be able to do that, and obviously there's then the complexity of processing that data in real time. To pick up on the direct question, the way our system works is that we integrate within to pretty much any environment, as long as we can make an outbound connection to stream data into our system. So we've got integrations with all the major CDNs, all the major load balancers, and then we've got a reverse proxy cloud-based solution as well. So we can fairly easily get up and running. In most situations, we can be up and running. We can be integrated within a couple of days, and we can be streaming traffic and starting to identify bots within a few days after that. So it's a fairly quick solution to get up and running. And again, obviously, the way our system works is that we do get better over time. As we start to understand more about your traffic, we can start tuning our system to make sure we're detecting more. Okay, so right, that's all the questions that we have got time for today. I think there is one more question which I will take offline. I think it's I'll pick that up with the person who's asked it. And Lizzie, unless you've got anything more to add to this, I think that we will say thank you very much to everyone who's tuned in today.
Yeah, nothing to add from me, so thanks from me also.
Yeah, and thank you very much, Lizzie, for presenting this webinar. And if anyone does have any more questions, need to get find out anything more about bot activity, or wants us to take a look at any bot problems that you may have, please get in touch with us at the address on screen. As Lizzie mentioned at the start, we will be following up the webinar with a copy of our evolving threat report. So hopefully everyone's enjoyed this webinar, and thank you very much.